This is the 5th episode on becoming a world champion in asset recovery. Focus on Central Asia.
Good day, dear participants. I hope you can hear me and see me. I'm very pleased to welcome you to our regular webinar. This is the webinar number 5. This is the UNODC event, which is organized together with the ARIN WCA network on the basis of the Academy and the General Prosecutor Office, the Law Enforcement Academy. The event is arranged with the support of Norwegian government. My name is Alexandra Vadinoy. I'm the original advisor on anti-money laundering, terrorism, counteracting terrorism financing. And the slogan for today's event, not stop waiting, don't wait until criminals steal and launder your income, your proceeds. Within the hour, we would like to consider the issues in the context of the government's activities and interaction between the PPP. We will focus on tracing virtual assets joint investigation and asset recovery. To the most part, we will focus on the processes happening in Central Asia, but at the same time, we plan to review the global and regional aspects. The main topics for our discussion today include the regional trends in virtual asset use and regulation, market development, regulatory approaches, the gaps, the challenges, the complications, and the solutions. We will also touch upon the regulation, how to be in compliance, the cooperation mechanism between public and private sector, and the platforms which are currently used to exchange information, and of course, the issue of the joint investigation, the asset recovery, the practical cooperation of the FIU, the investigators, and the private sector. We will be assisted by our distinguished experts, and I would like to thank them for their kind acceptance to be a part of this event. And I would like to briefly tell you about them. Alexei Fishchenko is the first expert who previously served as the regional advisor to the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. On cybercrime and money laundering, he was the regional lead in the program, and actually he worked a lot and contributed to the development of this area in general. Moreover, I would like to note that for more than 10 years, he held various positions in the financial intelligence units of Ukraine, and he was the first deputy head of the FIU of Ukraine. Today, he is an international expert working with the World Bank, international organizations, including UNODC. The second speaker is Sabit Amankosov, who has unique experience. He is the current officer in the General Prosecutor's Office of Kazakhstan in the Committee on Asset Recovery, and he also is experienced in the analytical work because he was a part of the Financial Intelligence Unit of the Republic of Kazakhstan, and he was dealing with the money laundering and recovery of criminal assets. One more speaker who agreed to share his experience is Timirlan Nurahimov. He is the CEO of a private company which was registered in the International Finance Center, and the main activities are strategic planning, investment fund development, the promotion of educational initiatives in the field of the virtual assets. He is also experienced in working with the public sector, which I guess is an important part of his career. Before we launch the dialogue with the experts, I would like to mention a couple of words generally about the current situation on this market. What are the main processes? And when in the morning we look at the news, we once again receive information about the successful competent authorities' actions in one of our countries. This is the Republic of Kazakhstan, the Financial Monitoring Agency, which shared its experience in terms of counteracting the illegal use of the virtual. They have eliminated about 15 the crime groups. They freezed the virtual assets amounting to more than 9 million, and this is only the part of their results achieved. And as far as I see, such kind of news, they appear in almost all of the countries participating on our webinar. There is certain practice which is being acquired, and at the same time we need to note that there is a rapid growth of using the financial technologies and virtual assets in our countries. On one hand, this is a contribution to the development of the economical capabilities of the countries, but at the same time, this poses certain risks because the criminals, they are actively using the virtual assets for the money laundering, for the terrorism financing, and for other extreme crimes. This is supported by the geographical location of the region on the crossroad of Europe and Asia, and also the high level of the transboundary financial flows, and also the availability of the informal economy. In the end, this impacts on the current situation. I would also like to point out that the international organizations, and first of all, the FATF, is trying to respond to these challenges. And just for your information, I would like to share the following. In 2018, FATF updated the international standards on money laundering and anti-money laundering and counteracting terrorism finance using the virtual asset services. In 2021, they adopted the new version of the guidelines on the use of the risk-oriented approach. And in 2023, the roadmap on the implementation of these requirements was also adopted. So the international community is also trying to respond accordingly. Then I would like to invite our dear speakers. Could you please share your vision on certain issues? And if Alexei agrees, first of all, I would like to call upon him because he is quite experienced in anti-money laundering, especially with regards to the virtual assets. Alexei is here with us. I'm happy to see you.
So I'll just ask a question. What kind of risks you see in using virtual assets? So thank you for the invitation, dear participants. A small comment. I have enough extreme viewpoint to the cryptocurrency, and with each year I'm becoming more extreme. One of the huge problems, if before we worked with financial tools that were developed for human and to work with the human processing and cryptocurrencies are, I think, the tool used by algorithms, computers, robots, and AI. And the characteristics is the high transaction speed, mobility, and possibility to create the accounts, smart contracts, and etc. This creates principal difference. So in traditional finances, if you need understanding of just financial tools, and you also need a legal education, but with the cryptocurrencies, as all knowledge is useful, but if you don't know to work with computer code, and if you don't have specialists who can do that, we will have some issues. And the second, the anonymity level is much higher compared to traditional tools. And what is happening in the region? A huge volume of transactions with cryptocurrencies related with foreign economic trade relations, and that creates liquidity of unregistered operators and creates an opportunity to exchange of information, like and for criminal purposes, usage of drops. Accounts opened under the name of other persons that give the passwords and access, and this way the possibility to create a zombie accounts that can be controlled by one person, and this is the principal difference. The only thing that holds cryptocurrencies to become one of the main tool for money laundering is liquidity. Even the if I was asked about this topic, I would say that laundering $1 million is possible with cryptocurrency, but billions was hard several years ago. Now we can do this. I have some examples, but they're invisible, and steadily this volume is growing. So you're just answering my second question. To which extent we can view the virtual assets as a main tool for money laundering? And as I understood that if today we don't have, but in a few years we can be sure that this will be the main means for money laundering, for legalization of the criminal proceedings. proceeds. And you implemented the projects for strengthening the capacity of law enforcement agencies on investigation of the virtual money laundering. And that's why I'd like to clarify what kind of challenges the law enforcement agencies had during such investigations, and if you had a possibility to highlight 2-3 challenges, I would be grateful to you. To train the law enforcement officers using the tools and to do the basic investigations is done quickly. We have the tools. And tools and people who can use them. This is the most simple problem, and it can be solved. But those investigations, they lead to one problem. You can, with the tools, to trace, but you need to get information with the real measures, and if it's a large stock, then there's a higher probability that you can get the answer. There are some stocks where it is very difficult to get the data. And now we talk about the public stocks. If the laundering was done through the exchange, non-registered operator, then with a high probability it will be no way. So you can't really proceed with your investigation. So you can just close the case and just go to another case. Alexei, I apologize. I'd like to clarify to the law enforcement officers, do they know to direct those requests? Do you have this experience? It's a good question. Usually, the approach which is recommended is the request should be sent by a special unit in the central office of the law enforcement agency. And the special unit, they should concentrate the cases. They should know the cases where the wallets are present, because it's not a problem that officer at the branch can send the request. It's not a big problem. It's possible, but with high probability, if such requests will be decentralized, we will have one case and duplication of case. Many units will work on the same case. And to avoid this, we recommend centralization of requests and the creation of databases of the wallets. Alexei, thank you. And I'd like to ask you to stay connected. to address our experts and know their opinion on certain issues. But before, I will provide the statistics. So I'd like to present the solution, let's say, summarize the solutions in our countries. In Kyrgyzstan, the mechanism on licensing and registration of providers of virtual assets. In Kyrgyzstan, there is a ban to use virtual assets as a payment for goods and services. But we know that they're developing the regulation to this market. Uzbekistan, there is no complete ban, but there is a strict restrictions. Virtual assets are not legal payment methods, cannot be used. But operations for purchase and sales are allowed through licensed platforms. Tajikistan. Currently, cryptocurrencies, virtual assets, they are in the gray zone. No, there is no official recognition and official ban, but the government develops a licensing system for crypto business, and they want to start formal regulation. In Turkmenistan, there is a ban to use virtual assets. The government doesn't recognize the crypto asset as a legal payment method. Kazakhstan, there is a ban for turnover of digital assets of cryptocurrencies, with exception of Astana International Financial Center. In Iran, they implement the regulation of virtual assets to be used in the economy, and they allowed several companies. Pakistan, they introduced the virtual assets regulation in 2025. So there is a decision. They created the authority, and they're responsible for licensing and oversight in this area. That's the information regarding the approaches in the Central Asian countries. And now I'd like to address our next speakers, Mr. Sabit. A few questions to you. So recently, all countries of Central Asia, they are strengthening the regime on combating the money laundering and financing terrorism with the FATF recommendations. And we can see that the attention is paid in Kazakhstan. So in this regard, I'd like to clarify what kind of practical measures are taken to identify and investigate the crimes using virtual assets. Good day, dear colleagues. We talk about practical measures to identify, investigate the crimes, usage of virtual assets. We apply contemporary analytical tools like transactions and the identification of the source of the assets. And together with law enforcement agencies and international partners. And also, we do the monitoring and analysis of the entities and also risk assessment of using virtual assets for the criminal purposes. Thank you, Sabit. And I think I will ask this question to all our experts. Did you have any investigations related to the virtual assets and three main issues or problems in investigating you could highlight? Please, thank you. Yes, we had such cases, and during the investigation, we did blockchain analytics to restore the connection between the sites, and identification of the chains of the transactions, and the beneficiaries. If we talk about the main problems, they are, first of all, cross-border operations, requires operative interaction with foreign competent authorities and international organizations. Second of all, usage of decentralized and anonymous platforms. It makes hard to identify the beneficiaries. The third, necessity to constantly update technological tools and new schemes. Then I understood that not everything is simple. So there is a problem and you need to solve it. In your opinion, is it difficult to block the asset, like virtual asset, and return it to the legal owner? In your opinion? Yes, there are some difficulties.
So the asset recovery is implemented within the certain procedures and international interaction. And we are using various tools, analytical blockchain data in the investigation, which help us to trace the movement of the assets. We are also working with the international requests, cooperating with the foreign jurisdictions. And we follow the criminal monitoring, financial monitoring, introducing the limitations in terms of the use of the assets. Thank you, Sabit, for your comment. I understand that in Kazakhstan, there is enough of the experience accumulated in terms of such investigations and the use of the relevant tools for these investigations. And I would like to clarify. Please let me tell me, do you consider the private companies, the private sector, as the partners for the investigation with the use of the virtual assets? And if you do consider the private sector as the partner, then that's okay. But if there are any complications or challenges, please let us know what are they, what are the problems, the barriers, for example, for this cooperation. Thank you very much for the attention. When needed, we can attract the private analytical companies with the specialized technical solutions and experience in such kind of blockchain analysis. So such kind of interaction is implemented within the current legislation, and while we meet the requirements towards the protection of the personal data, confidential information, the main barriers would be the limited access to the confidential information, restricted information, and something what is related to the confidentiality of our work, but we do not have any barriers for the legal cooperation. It's actually very efficient. Okay, thank you. Please let me know. Maybe it's a provocative question, but still, will the law enforcement agencies be able to deal with such kind of work without the private sector engagement? Or no, the private sector is the reliable partner, and those who work in the private sector, they actually can assist you and be of use. I cannot tell for sure, but the private sector actually showcases various progressive steps taken And sometimes we are surprised by this new elements they are introducing, the innovations. Okay, thank you, Sabit. I would also like to ask you to stay with us to be a part of the dialogue because you may have some other comments. Now, I would like to remind our dear participants that we have one more expert, an excellent one, the representative from the private sector. And in my professional opinion, the role of the private sector in financial investigation with the use of the virtual assets is becoming more and more significant within the conditions of the growing dynamics of the digitalization in economy. And we also believe that such companies play a serious role and may help, first of all, to the law enforcement agencies in the analysis of the blockchain data. Also, they can assist in tracing the virtual assets, in revealing suspicious addresses, analyzing the connections between certain transactions, and of course, there is another point to this issue when we need to meet the confidentiality requirement, but at the same time, we will explore the opinion of one of our experts, Timirlan. Hope you can also hear us clearly. Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak up. I'm here to respond. Yes, that's great. So the question is quite simple. Please let us know, in your experience, what types of crimes with the use of the virtual assets are most frequent in the process of investigation related to the virtual assets, given your practice and experience. Thank you. Thank you. I would say the following. As of today, this is a big problem, the cyber fraud with the use of the digital assets. So in the private sector, we are approached by people who would like to improve their financial literacy, to understand the analytics, the blockchain analytics, in particular, the relevant tools. And the majority of those who are approaching us, these are the people who actually failed in this field, and they wired their funds via cryptocurrency to foreign holders of certain accounts. And that is why our targeted group is represented by the people who actually believed in the financial pyramids, for example, or in schemes. And even we had cases when people believing in all of this, they sold the real estate that they had, and they sent their money with the hope that they would earn more, and they used the digital tools for the transaction. So here the main threat, in our opinion, is that if the currency of certain countries is limited somehow in terms of the turnover, in digital, there are no boundaries, no limitations. And if transactions were involving the digital currency, then the risk is very high. For minimum commission, you can send the funds to any country in the world. And this is used by the criminals, by the fraudsters, and even the representatives of the terrorist organizations, when they try to fund their activities, they also use such kind of tools. That is why we mostly face the situations when people are involved in the schemes. Okay, Tamerlan, thank you for the comment. This is actually almost the same what was mentioned by Alexei. So this is a very serious challenge to the law enforcement agencies and to the investigations as well. We are trying to use the old method and impact the new problem, the new challenge. But in my opinion, this is the main barrier. And Sabit also pointed out that there are tools available and relevant instruments that could be used for the purpose of the investigation. But at the same time, this may not be enough because the criminals, they always improve their methods, and the problem might be not resolved in a certain period of time. And in my expert opinion, we do not know enough about the virtual assets, about their functioning and the way they could be used for the relevant criminal activity and actually development of the economy. Please inform us, do you have any experience of joint work with the law enforcement agencies when you had to block certain virtual assets, when you were able to get back the stolen assets? How long was the investigation? I think it will be of interest to our participants. Before I respond, I actually would like to add the following. The victims, they do not have any understanding of the blockchain ecosystem, how receive certain requests or people share their stories. We tell that there are certain tools and they are publicly available. You don't have to pay, but you can create a transaction map to make it visible, and the people, they can see their funds, the routes the funds followed. And today we have a case thanks to which the process is not complete, finalized, but we had some information about the wallet, the source from which all of the rest of the transactions were expanded. And then we could even follow the centralized exchanges where these funds from the main wallet were wired. So yes, we had such a case, but this case is reviewed not within Kazakhstan's territory. For the successful completion, we will need the foreign jurisdictions to step in. So our reports we have prepared, they will be used in the judiciary by other country. That's very nice, great news, a very interesting example. And you know, when we considered the issue of your participation in our event, we actually thought, we hoped that you are an international company and you have relevant experience in investigation. So if the investigation is completed successfully and you can offer some interesting solutions, I would kindly ask you to share the solutions. Maybe we can sum up the information, and then we will share this information with the rest of the participants so they would know about this unique practice, how to deal with a certain problem. So maybe a more specific question, but as far as I know, there are certain virtual assets which are most commonly used for money laundering, for committing the crime, because of some circumstances. Manira, Dash, I believe that most of the participants, they know about it. So if you were asked to provide an advice, what problems may appear in the identification of such assets and how these problems could be addressed? Generally speaking, such tokens and as Monera, Dash, they're highly anonymous. and it's almost not possible to trace the chain of the transactions. And if I'm not mistaken, in advanced countries, in Western countries, there are even monetary awards being offered for those who can create a platform which could help with the monitoring. But based on what I see today, the main tip would be the conversion or the attempt to withdraw the money, to withdraw the cash, because Monero tokens on centralized or licensed exchanges, they are not listed there. They're not used. They are only used on the decentralized or anonymous platforms. And because of this anonymity, it would be very difficult to trace them. So it would be easier to address the entry or exit points to identify the beneficiaries, the holders, the owners. Okay, thank you. If I understand you correctly, ultimately everything is about the cash, because criminals, they try to withdraw the criminal proceeds. They try to take it from the virtual assets to the tangible assets, and here the law enforcement agency should intervene. Yes, thank you. In your work, you use the international platform StrongScan, blockchain, chain analysis. Can you please tell us what is the main feature which explains the usefulness of the platform? So if the person, a natural person or a business entity, if they understand that at some point they are being subjected to fraud or their assets are being stolen. For example, we had two cases when two partners worked with mining. They had the same wallet, and one of the partners was dishonest and tried to take these digital assets and to transfer to other wallets, e-wallets. These tools help with identifying this attempt, the hash transactions, for example, up to even the seconds, to create the map of the transaction, to come up with the picture, to understand what has happened. And these materials could be used when approaching the law enforcement agencies as the evidence database. Okay, great. Thank you. I think that this information will be especially useful for our law enforcement agents, because in the recent years, we have seen a tendency when we have more and more of the requests for the technical assistance. So we could help with purchasing software capable of the analysis of such transactions. And this is a certain benchmark for us, showing that there should be some serious work done in this field, in this area. With your permission, one more question, and then I would address all of our experts. What software solutions should be in place within the virtual asset service provider to meet the requirements of the standards on anti-money laundering and counteracting terrorism financing? I guess this is maybe an off-topic question, but still, this is very important to understand how efficient can we be. I mean, maybe software solutions, or there should be a certain structure. Based on what I know and what I have faced generally, when someone is using the digital assets at the digital exchanges, there is the know your client procedure, which is mandatory, because this helps with identifying people who are trying to take in or take out the assets, to transfer them from the digital world to the real world, for example. That is why this is a mandatory procedure, because the lack of these procedures will allow using more and more of the cryptocurrencies for the illegal actions. And these service providers, they need to have the blockchain analytics, the software, which also helps in the real-time mode to monitor the risks of the cryptocurrency, the level of the contamination where it was seen previously. So this is something what is mandatory for the virtual asset service providers. And the regulator introduces the travel rule. So the center of a certain wallet is compiling a so-called white lists of wallets which are used for the transactions. This improves the transparency for the regulator, for the law enforcement agency, so they would understand the flow of the cryptocurrency. Who is the owner? Was it seen in any suspicious transaction? Thank you, Tamerlan. I think that this information will be of great interest and use to our representatives from the competent authorities while communicating with the private sector working with the virtual assets. They would know what is the minimum standard with set of a software which they should have. And now I would like to address our three experts, the quiz, let's say. Let's have a quiz. Actually, it's very short. The first question is as follows. What do you think? What should be done to ensure the high level of interaction and intelligence sharing between the private sector and competent authorities during the relevant investigations? Maybe I can answer. Yes, please. I think that first of all, we need to create the communication platforms or channels or working groups to exchange information. I think this is the backbone of the successful work. Okay, Alexei, Tamerlan, anything to add? I guess I would repeat what was mentioned by Sabit on the interaction during the investigations. There are a lot of investigations by the public authorities, and there is not enough of the physical capacity, for example, lack of the human resources, no technologies, and no research of the risky business. This is something which cannot be done by none of the authorities globally. That is why the part of the research should be done by the private companies, the contractors. And as Sabit mentioned here, we start facing two problems. One of the main problems is the funds, because this is not cheap to arrange everything. And to explain the Ministry of Finance that we need to pay $400 per hour to an expert for the investigation, this is some fun and interesting activity. Another issue, the rules for the interaction, the rules for the engagement of the private experts. First of all, this is the issue of the confidentiality, accessibility, but this is a solvable issue. But the main point here is the question, why did we choose this supplier and not another one? And here there are additional questions with regards to the public procurement, anti-corruption services. They are becoming even more interested in the process. That's why we need to set the rules of the play to regulate the procedures of engaging private companies. Thank you, Alexei. Tamerlan, anything to add here? Yes, I actually agree, because indeed the private companies, they could cover a lower level of work, for example, what is related to the scheming, because the public authorities, they need to be involved in a more large scale activity. For example, there are a lot of complaints coming from the individuals, and private companies, they could help here. And I understand that we have a uniform understanding. Our colleagues from the committee and Alexei and Tamerlan mentioned that there is an opportunity to interact, but for this we need to try to do our best to regulate these activities and to attract actually experts from the private sector, because the scale of the problem and the complexity of the problem could not be dealt with by only the law enforcement agencies, and private sector could be useful here. Great. One more question from our quiz. I would like to clarify with the experts. If you had a chance to mention only one practical measures which should be taken immediately at the governmental level to improve the efficiency of the investigations on the virtual assets, what would it be? What would you propose? Thank you. I would propose an organizational action, a measure. No one likes the interagency group as a word, but for the cryptocurrency, it would work the best to create at the governmental level a steering or interagency center committee, which is focusing on the information on crypto investigation. It's not mandatory to share information about the cases, but the general base of wallets.
And in specificity of center, we can do more difficult investigations. Thank you. Alexei, thank you. Tamerlan, Sabita, do you have any opinion on that? Yes, I'd like to agree with Alexei. So the Department of Interagency Center would allow to increase the speed of reaction on identification of problems, and would ensure one standard for investigations. Thank you. Tamerlan, do you have any opinion? In principle, everything was voiced. If we are based on our experience in Kazakhstan, I think Financial Intelligence Investigation Center has authority on crypto investigations, and up to date. That's enough. I don't have any more comments. To improve the level of the investigations, any proposals? I think those providers of the analytics, they're not enough. Okay, thank you. It's not a simple question, and it's not easy to advise, for example, on solving the state problems. Maybe it's not even a task for private sector, but this feedback is very important. The feedback from you. Well, thank you. Then I'd like to thank our expert speakers for your response, but we're not saying goodbye. We have work with our participants the following way. During our webinar, they formed questions and they sent us questions. And we need some time to process. Okay. Thank you.
Our colleagues from the General Prosecutor's Office of the Republic of Uzbekistan is that the funds could be transferred to the cold wallets, and it's practically not possible to identify the real owners. As we know, such transactions may happen without any tracing, not only to launder money from the corruption proceeds, but also to finance terrorism. So the question is as follows: what are the practical legal mechanisms you would recommend to identify the owners of the cold wallets and for tracing such transactions within the lack of the licensed service providers with the virtual assets in the region? And the question number 2, can you make an example, a specific example of the successful case with the participation of the commercial blockchain analysts and the foreign law enforcement agencies? Once again, the practical measures, the practical legal mechanisms which could be recommended to reveal the owners of the cold wallets. I have a comment. First, the tracing of the cold wallet owners is almost the same as to find the owner of the gold, which was hidden in the woods. So technically, you do not know whether it is a cold or a hot wallet. This is just a wallet with the tokens, the coins. While they are not moving, the only thing you can do is to trace their origin and then step by step try to get to the owner. It may work, it may not work. There is no 100% guarantee. So it's not much you can do here. If you can act differently, then the cold wallets usually, the keys, the codes, other tools, they are stored on certain tangible carriers, for example, paper records, engraved code on a steel, the keys on the computer, on phone. Usually these keys, the access codes are found while doing the search. So every time when you do the search of the premises, of the people, your staff should know what to pay attention to. This is a small comment on my side. Okay, if you want to respond to the second question, you can proceed. The second question, I can here speak about the case in Kazakhstan, financial pyramid, the victims. the law enforcement agencies were involved in the investigation. There was the blockchain technique. As a result, there was information received to make sure that the organizers of the pyramid would repay the victims. Yes, this is an interesting example, but we need to assess it following the result. If the money was paid back to the victims, I think this is a success story. Yes, Alexei, thank you very much. Our dear experts, colleagues, maybe you have something to add here to make a comment? Yes, I would like to add the practical legal mechanisms. We need to understand, first of all, what is the cryptocurrency? If it is the Bitcoin, then it would be extremely difficult to find the owner. But if there is the stable coin, we know there are manufacturers, producers, they have remote access keys. And if law enforcement agencies prove that the origin of this proceeds on the wallets of criminal origin, then remote freezing is quite possible. Okay, thank you. Sabit, did you have any examples in your practice related to the investigation when you worked with the cold wallets, and you may advise something to our colleagues from Uzbekistan? Actually, colleagues voiced all of the practical measures. Okay, thank you. Let's move on. We have one more question from our participants. How in practice we can identify and break down the schemes when from the cryptocurrencies the funds are transferred to Asian black markets sold for euro, and then the money is withdrawn through PSP, for example, Revolut, to the cards, given the risks of the corruption and financial terrorism? I will repeat the question once again because it's not simple to interpret when I read out the question. How in practice we can identify and intercept the relevant schemes when the cryptocurrency from the exchange is transferred to Asian black markets? I guess this is the underground banking market and not controlled markets. And then the virtual assets are sold for euro, and then the money is withdrawn through P2P transaction to the credit or debit card. So this is something around the fiat currency. And our participant is also asking for the consideration of the risks of the corruption and financial terrorism. A comment from my side. If you see that this is the scheme and you have some investigation research, you can identify certain patterns, then the Revolut situation is quite interesting. The Revolut situation, they're trying to get the banking license. As you have mentioned, Revolut is using only the PSP license. So if you see the trends and you show them to the regulator, for example, in Great Britain or European country, then Revolut will not be able to refuse to deny to add additional criteria to identify such schemes to be able to get the license to do So they need to promote the implementation of the legislation. So naturally, the scheme would be closed on the side of the PSP. On the side of the big regulated financial provider is easier to organize than to do something on the Asian black market. Thank you, Alexei. I am not a serious expert in this field. That's why I would agree with you. But generally, having this general understanding, trying to get information about the transaction on the Asian black market, I guess even the governments of these countries are not capable of providing information. And I'm not speaking about the international requests, which could be sent from Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, or any other country. So yes, thank you for your opinion, for your comment. Maybe Sabit or Timberland will add. I think in this situation, only using the platforms like chain analysis, crystal elliptic for the blockchain analytic, and actual law enforcement agencies, they have access to these platforms and they can only report. Report on the risks of certain wallets involved in the scheme. Accordingly, we can only increase the risk score of this wallet with cryptocurrency. So in future, this chain would not work, and the cryptocurrency which was involved will not be the subject of taking cash. Okay, Sabit, anything to add? I agree with the colleagues that mostly we need to monitor the transactions with the use of the blockchain analytics tools. Okay, thank you for your opinion and the feedback provided to our participants. I see that there are no further questions, but given the intensity of the dialogue, the questions which were covered by us, I guess we can explain the situation by saying that the information which was provided was enough for our participants. Once again, I would like to thank our dear experts for their participation. I would like to thank you for being with us and hope that we will continue this interesting work in the format of the webinars with the support of the UNODC and Erin WCA. I would like to remind you that this is the series of the webinars which provide for meetings being held every 2 weeks, and we will discuss another topic next time, but on the virtual assets and the relevant investigations which are performed in this field with the focus on the law enforcement agencies' activities. We plan to have the second part of the event, and if I'm not mistaken, it will happen on the 28th of November. So we will wait for you on our regular webinars and addressing the participants and maybe experts even. I would like to say that we are recording all of our webinars and we post the links and the videos on the website of our regional office. So if any of the colleagues would like to get more information about what we have discussed and to actually have an understanding of our dialogue, they will have a chance in a week or a week and a half to access this recording. Once again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, dear experts. I would like to thank my colleagues who assisted in the organization of this event. I wish you all the best and see you soon. Thank you. Goodbye.